If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. The foundation built on Exile, General David Bradford, arrived in Spanish West Florida in 1796 with death hanging over his head. Federal marshals carried warrants bearing President George Washington's personal seal, orders to arrest and execute the former leader of the Whiskey Rebellion. Bradford had led thousands of Pennsylvania farmers in armed resistance against the federal whiskey tax, burning tax collectors' homes and threatening to march on Pittsburgh. When Washington mobilized 13,000 federal troops to crush the rebellion, Bradford fled south into exile. He purchased 600 acres of wilderness near Baton Rouge and began construction of his refuge. Bradford called his estate Laurel Grove, but locals would later know it as the Myrtles Plantation. Federal records show Bradford lived in constant fear during those early years, never knowing when soldiers might arrive at his door. He built the house with wide verandas that offered clear views of approaching visitors, friend or foe. President John Adams granted Bradford a full pardon in 1799, yet the plantation's foundation remained rooted in violence and desperation. How strange that this estate, built by a man running from death, would become famous for ghostly murders that historical records prove never happened. The real tragedy of the Myrtles began with Bradford's exile, not with the fictional victims that tour guides would later invent. The poisoned cake that never was. The most famous ghost story at the Myrtles Plantation centers on Chloe, a young enslaved woman who allegedly worked in the main house. According to the legend told to thousands of visitors, Chloe served as Judge Clark Woodruff's unwilling concubine during the early 1800s. When she was caught listening at doors, trying to learn if the family planned to sell her, Woodruff ordered her left ear cut off as punishment. She wore a green turban to hide the disfigurement. Desperate for revenge but not wanting to kill the family, Chloe supposedly baked a birthday cake laced with crushed oleander leaves for Sarah Woodruff and her daughters. The plan backfired when the poison proved more deadly than expected. Sarah Woodruff died in agony, followed by her two young daughters. The other enslaved workers, fearing they would all be punished for Chloe's crime, dragged her from the quarters and hanged her from an oak tree. They weighted her body with rocks and threw it into the Mississippi River, denying her proper burial. But death records from St. Francisville tell a completely different story. Sarah Woodruff died of yellow fever on July 21, 1823. Her children James and Cornelia Gale died of the same disease in 1824, victims of an epidemic that killed hundreds across Louisiana that year. Most shocking of all, extensive searches through property inventories, slave records, and plantation documents reveal no trace of anyone named Chloe or Cleo ever living at the Myrtles. The woman whose ghost allegedly haunts the plantation never existed at all. The only confirmed murder. The gunshot rang out on a winter evening in 1871. William Drew Winter, a respected attorney living at the Myrtles Plantation, had stepped onto his front porch when an unknown assailant opened fire. Court records and newspaper accounts confirmed the shooting happened, but Winter did not die instantly. Instead, the mortally wounded man managed to stumble back inside his home. What happened next became part of documented history and unexplained mystery alike. Winter began climbing the grand staircase, perhaps trying to reach his wife and children upstairs, or perhaps driven by simple dying instinct. He made it to the 17th step before collapsing. There, according to multiple witness accounts recorded in estate documents, he bled to death. The bloodstain reportedly remained visible on that wooden step for decades afterward, despite repeated attempts to scrub it clean. The killer's identity remains unknown to this day. Some historical sources mention a man identified only as E.S., who may have been involved in business or legal disputes with Winter. Unlike the elaborate revenge tale of Chloe, Winter's murder offers no dramatic resolution. just a widow left with children and an unsolved case that turned cold. Here lies the puzzle that changes everything about the Myrtles mystery. Visitors and staff consistently report hearing footsteps climbing the staircase at night. These steps always stop at the 17th step, exactly where Winter died. The photograph that changed everything. In 1992, everything changed when the Myrtles property owner captured what appeared to be impossible. The photograph showed a translucent figure standing on the veranda between the main house and general store. The image revealed a woman in period clothing, her dark skin visible beneath ragged garments, and a distinctive green turban wrapped around her head. Every detail matched the Chloe descriptions that had circulated for years, despite no historical record of such a person ever existing. A National Geographic Explorer crew examined the photograph and reportedly concluded it definitely contained what appeared to be an apparition. This institutional backing transformed local folklore into documented evidence. The image became central to documentaries and marketing materials, with tour guides encouraging visitors to examine their own photographs for spectral children and mysterious window figures that only appeared during later review. Yet troubling questions emerged about this critical evidence. The original negatives for the famous 1992 Chloe photograph have vanished completely, making independent verification impossible. Skeptics noted the convenient timing. The image surfaced precisely when paranormal tourism was becoming economically vital, and the Myrtles was positioning itself for ghost tour revenue. How could a single photograph convince trained investigators and millions of visitors they had proof of a ghost whose human form never existed in any historical record? When investigators found too much, the professional investigations only deepened the mystery. When ghost hunters arrived at the Myrtles in 2005, their equipment recorded electromagnetic field spikes that spiked without explanation. Their cameras captured temperature drops of 15 degrees in seconds. The team documented electronic devices shutting off by themselves throughout the night. What troubled investigators most were the consistent witness accounts. Staff members reported hearing children's laughter echoing from empty verandas. Guests photographed what appeared to be small figures playing in areas where no children had been present. These visitors knew nothing about the plantation's alleged history when they snapped their pictures. Frances Myers encountered something even more puzzling in 1987. She woke to find a woman in a green turban standing beside her bed, holding a glowing candle. The figure cast real light across the room before vanishing when Myers reached toward it. The woman had never heard the local stories about turban spirits. How could witnesses consistently report experiences tied to events that never happened? The haunted mirror presented perhaps the strangest case. Guests claimed to see handprints and faces appearing moments after staff cleaned the glass. Yet historical records showed no Sarah Woodruff ever died at the plantation. The mystery of authentic hauntings at a house of lies. Years of meticulous historical research have torn apart the Myrtles Plantation's most famous ghost stories. Court records show no evidence of Chloe's existence. Death certificates reveal the Woodruff children died from yellow fever, not poisoning. The legendary 10 murders shrink to just one confirmed killing when investigators examine actual documentation. Lewis Sterling's burial records list yellow fever as his cause of death in 1854, not a gambling dispute stabbing, as ghost tours claim. Yet paranormal researchers face a troubling contradiction. Despite the fabricated history, something genuinely strange continues happening at the plantation. Visitors report identical experiences that match the debunked legends. Independent witnesses describe the same apparitions, sounds, and phenomena that align with stories now proven false. How can a location be authentically haunted by events that never occurred? Some researchers propose that collective belief itself generates paranormal activity. When thousands of people focus emotional energy on specific stories, that concentrated thought might create real manifestations, even when the original events were fictional. Others suggest the authentic suffering at the plantation, slavery, disease, and William Winter's actual unsolved murder creates residual energy that visitors experience, but interpret through the dramatic false narratives they've heard.